What's going on, everyone? Hope you're having a great start to the new year so far. It's your boy Adi, and this is the Tradition in Motion show where we highlight folks who are doing blazing their own paths in this world. And today I have a pleasure to introduce one of my good friends. He's based in Austin. He's a renowned sales professional, and he's now a newly minted content creator. So if you're looking to learn how you can tell your sales skills and tell your own story, you're not going to want to miss this episode. Welcome to the show, Theo.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. I know we've been talking about doing it for quite some time now, so glad we actually were able to make it happen, man. I know schedule differences and everything, but glad to be on the show.
Absolutely. It took us a couple weeks for context to get some time amidst the technical difficulties. So, yeah, man. First question I love to ask all my guests is, man, what was Theo like as a kid? Like, take me back to, like, way back when.
What was I like as a kid? Interesting questions. And I've heard other people ask that question too. So let me go quick into this because I want to ask the question, then I want to answer the question and ask because I'm kind of curious, what made you ask that? But yeah, a
Okay.
little bit about me as a kid. I think if you watch anime, it's a story that resonates with me, right? To where you're like that guy, kind of that guy in the corner, kind of like the lame kid, and you end up kind of like discovering your thing. And anime, it's like, let's say for example your ability, or you have your moment you start shining, kind of start believing in your self confidence, then you mature and grow into a different person. So when I was younger, I'd say definitely more the shy kid, more the guy in the corner, more like the guy not really doing anything in front of other people, just always wanted to kind of be like behind the scenes. You know what I'm saying? I think that's a good way to explain. Answers your question.
Absolutely. And no, to me, man, the reason why I asked that question is I'm always curious as to everyone's origin story. Whether it's a song, whether it's a movie or any type of content, there's an origination story to it. So I'm always curious as to that. And so my follow up question there, man, is I think as a kid, what type of content resonated with you? Like, were you the type to watch like all the superhero action packed shows on Cartoon Network? Were you more of a mystery trivial like TV show watcher? What was your jam back?
Yeah, man. Like I was saying, anime, man. That's my thing. I think it goes back to, I mean, of course, you got the Tom and Jerry, you got the cartoons and stuff, but I remember the Saturday cartoons, like the animes, like waking up my brother, man, going like, we had, back when we had the VCR and VCR days, pressing that recorder, having it record the episodes of the cartoons going on for that whole Saturday. So I think definitely anime, man. I've been into it from a very young age, and I'm still with it. So yeah.
That's awesome. What was your favorite anime show back then? And what is your favorite anime show now?
When I was a kid, I think the classics like Yu-Gi-Oh! It had this version like Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and I really liked it because it would come on like after school. So get off of school around like I think 3 or 4 at this time. I was in forgot what grade, but right after that, I think elementary school or so maybe 4 to 5. But right after that, boom, got the cartoons on, got the anime, got the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. During that time, it became a little bit of a tradition that I had. So I think that's definitely one that stood with me when I was very, very young on. As of right now, this might be something a lot of people might not be willing to dedicate the time for, but I'd say One Piece. That's definitely my top one right now. Yeah, and I got a lot of others, but yeah.
Peace. Hey, I was gonna say. I mean, I remember every birthday back in the day trying to get the Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and so I still have, I think, my Summon Skulls and Blue Eyed Dragon card somewhere in the house. So I resonate with that heavily, man. And so yeah, I think when you look back at your childhood and early adolescence, like, who do you think was like the biggest influence in your life, and why?
You're saying my early childhood.
Like, who's the biggest influence? Like, if you think about growing up, like, whether it could be a show, it could be a person, it could be an event. Like, what was that? When you look back, I'm like, huh, like that played a huge part in who Theo is today.
Yeah, so interesting take. I wouldn't say a person. I think it's been a lot of people, right? Like there was a time in elementary school, as my teacher, Mr. Bullen Senior. This guy had a super cool background, military, all this stuff, and I think the way he taught definitely influenced me at a very early age, especially when I was, really track minded on a certain goal when I was younger. I think he was probably the first person that comes to mind. Of course, parents also always a classic answer. They always play a role in you growing up and everything like that. And I think as well the people that I'd come to see in anime, you know what I'm saying? Because the thing I love the most about anime, although it has good graphics, depending on the show, is the story. Like that person going through that development of being a level character, going all the way up to like top tier. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like being that is something that I've seen along my journey in life, I think that's something that really influences me. So to answer your questions, teachers, parents, and anime characters. I think those are the top three.
Nice. That's really great to hear. So yeah, let's just switch lanes a little bit, man. I think for you, I think when you think about like creating content, like what's the inspiration behind it? Like at this stage in life, I guess, what are some of the, I know anime is a huge pillar in, kind of growing up, pastimes, but when you think about the space of content creation now in 2025, like where do you feel like there's the biggest opportunity to, create like a unique take on like what's going on, and then two, like the why?
Yeah, so if I had to say my biggest purpose for creating content is my love to network, right? So a little bit about what I do is my podcast is titled the name of my podcast is What Is Your Title, right? And what I'm doing is having different entrepreneurs, especially early on, people that are just getting into business on to really talk about what they do, why they got into it, just a lot of the stuff, because there's a lot of people I've met that they wanna do something, but they're too scared to do something, right? So to answer your question, it became something with a combination of things. My love for networking, talking to people, hence us, networking before this show and now being on this show. And also just my love to also try to help people and kind of tuck people in the right direction to where like I know it's something they want to do, but you got to help yourself. So I think if you see other people doing what you want to do, it makes it so much easier. So to answer your question, I think it was those two things that got me really into making content, man. Of course, just love conversations. So yeah, that's always a good thing to do.
I think for me, like the cool thing about creating content is just the collaboration aspect, right? There's a lot of folks, even way back when I was working on my first podcast, like during the pandemic, it was like, that was like my way to just meet people, because back then, with all the restrictions, specifically like, in Cali, like, you really couldn't leave the house unless you're going to pick up groceries. And so that was a good way for me to still just, stay social. So I totally resonate with that. A lot of times, folks kind of get bombarded with a lot of information, but they don't really take the action. So I think, too, it's a combination of you need to find people who are at where you want to be, but also to just be consistent. I think a lot of times in today's day and age, like, people will start something, they don't get some momentum after a couple months, they throw in the towel and they'll jump to something else. And, a couple of years, even a decade or decades will go by, and it's like, you're just trying a lot of different things, but you didn't really see something through. So you're like essentially in the same spot. So no, that's dope.
That's an interesting point too, because I think a lot of us do have those people who they're always learning but never acting. You know what I mean?
Right.
Always learning the new thing, always watching, what's the new fad. Maybe like they're always learning about, the trends, but they never act on it. You know what I'm saying? So that's definitely definitely a good thing to differentiate between the people that just think about doing the thing, people who actually do the thing after having information. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, even in the space of content creation, I feel like if you look at people's average screen time, whether it's, on their laptop or phone, I think most of it is either on social media, whether it's like, Instagram or Twitter or TikTok, which again is, I guess, active for now. We'll see how that goes. Or YouTube, right? They're usually consuming other creators' things versus, potentially seeing how can I create something myself.
Yeah, man. So I want to ask too, right? As far as what we're talking about, right? What do you think makes the biggest difference between someone who's just thinking about doing something and someone actually crossing that threshold and actually doing the action, right?
Yeah, I think, man, it's a great question. I would say there's a couple factors. I think one is environment. Environment could mean your physical, literal environment, like, who you live with, who do you spend time with. I think, two, it's the mindset around like, okay, like, am I willing to start something and not be good at it? Because fundamentally, like, as human beings, you're never going to be good at something off the bat. Now, there's exceptions to that, but it takes reps. There's a reason why there's the 10,000 hour theory. And I think the last part is like the why. Right? I think, maybe part of why a lot of people will jump from trend to trend is there's not really an entrenched, like, deep-rooted why. Like, and I think a lot of times, we'll just go through the motions of, like, just doing things to do things versus actually figuring out, like, what are our values, what do we want to do with this, and what is, like, the end goal. And the end goal doesn't necessarily have to mean a specific, like, metric or outcome, but it, I think, is it aligned with what do you want to actually do? And so I think those things play a huge part in determining if someone will start versus not. Because I think when the going gets rough, if you have a strong enough why, you'll stick through. Versus if it's just something that someone planted in your head that was a good idea, you're going to, drop it when like the resistance gets pretty high.
Yeah, man. I think that's definitely hitting the nail on the head. Like the importance of having that vision, right? At least having some type of like framework where you want to go and everything. So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah, man. I guess question for you, man. I think inspired off that. Where do you feel like there's the biggest challenge with content creation now? And what I mean by that is, I think there's an aspect, right, where I think there's, everyone in a sense, they want to create more exposure for what they're creating. Whether that's for monetary reasons or, just to go viral or, to grow their audience. But there's also the aspect of sometimes people who go down that path of, clickbaiting, creating viral, like going for the sake of being viral to be viral versus staying true to who they are and, what was the purpose of them putting things out there. So I guess where do you feel like that balance lies right now, and how do you feel like you want to incorporate that in your own show?
So just to make sure, you're saying what are the problems with content creation, right?
Yeah.
If I had to answer that question, I think what comes to mind for me is either lack of inspiration or lack of execution. I feel like those are the two biggest problems that hit a lot of content creators, right? So if I have to dig into the lack of inspiration part, it could be something towards like you mentioned earlier, hitting into that why, right? Like what's your purpose for actually wanting to do this? Because you could have an external thing, in my opinion at least, right? To where it's like, hey, I want to make this content because I'm gonna hit how many figures I want to hit, and that's cool. But also like go deeper with that. Like, why do you want to make that money? Like, what are you gonna do with that money? Are you gonna be able to change lives, support your family? This. But I feel like when you don't have that inspiration to get you to make the content when you don't want to make the content, it won't become habitual, right? If it's not a habit, you'll make content maybe for X amount of days, months, weeks, years, whatever you want to say, then you'll stop. And I think one thing that you hear a lot is it's a marathon, right? It's something to where you have to keep going. So if you're not able to keep going, have something to push you to inspire you to keep going and make that content, I don't think you're gonna continue, right? Second thing is execution. You also want to have, it's like you plan if you don't make a plan, you plan to fail. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So if you don't have steps to where you're going to execute once you have that inspiration, it'll be almost like the person that always has a good idea but never acts on any of the ideas. And you don't want to be that either, right? Because one side is like you always got the bright ideas, like yo, you do, you know what I'm saying? But you don't shoot any content. And then the other side is like you're willing to shoot the content, but you don't do any of the other work. You don't have the feeling to want to do it, even though you might be competent in that area. So I think like being inspired and being competent as far as learning your craft, what you need to do, I think those are the two things that people don't focus on that kill them the most, if that answers your question.
Great. I think I'm just curious from your perspective when it comes to that balance of like with the end goal of trying to, let's say, for example, go viral and, create clickbait style titles versus, hey, if like, for example, if Theo knew that if he could post whatever title versus, a targeted clickbait title and he would get the same amount of views, right, and get the same destination, you'd probably operate the same. But if you knew, for example, you'd get 10x the views if you create a controversial title, you're going to do that. So I'm just curious, like, how do you feel like you want to find that balance in your own journey?
Well, I think, so like, yeah, if you create the clickbait title, you're going to get more people and stuff, right? But I guess like my question would be, is it a clickbait title? Like this is some way I would look at it. Is it a clickbait title to the point where it still goes with what my values are with my channel, like what I'm trying to do? Or is it so clickbait that it would even attract the audience that's not my intended audience? You know what I'm saying? Because I feel like I definitely would do that stuff to where like if you get a twist on a situation, make it more saucy, of course you get more, you know what I'm saying? Of course you get more attention and stuff, right? Like why wouldn't you do that, right? I think it only makes sense. You want to present yourself better. I get that. But if it's I'm presenting like something that it's really not, and someone that I don't want, that's not my ideal audience to come view the video, so I guess that's how I would balance it out. I would ask a question of, okay, if I make this clickbait or if I make this sauce or like whatever tactics I'm using at the end of the day, is it a tactic that would help me enhance what I'm looking for my certain clientele, or is it a tactic that would just get me like short-term gratification from all these views, but lead to nothing in the long term for my, channel, my business, all that stuff?
Absolutely no. Great points there. I'm just curious now, I think, with the content you consume, are there any specific folks that you're like, I love what they're doing and I want to emulate what they're doing on, YouTube or Instagram or whichever forums you're looking to target?
Yeah, man, 100%. I think dropping some more known names. I would say, of course, Alex Hormozy is a person that I listen to, and these aren't people that agree with every single thing, but they do have a lot of things that they say that either resonate with me, make me think, or it opens up a perspective that I didn't have before. So I feel like definitely Alex Hormozy is a definitely a good person I would check out for anyone who doesn't know him. Myron Golden, someone else I also listen to as well. As far as he does a lot of sales in my background. So sales talks about branding, stuff of that nature. I'd say those are the top two people. There's a lot of other people I listen to, but those are probably the top people I listen to at this current moment, if I had to say.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm usually binging some aspect of Hormozy content lately. I think in this world of entrepreneurship and building something, there's a lot of days where you're like, "Dang, is this really going to pan out?" And I think he just has—I don't know what it is. I think he's subconsciously reading my mind, but he just knows to post the right things at the right time. Like, you know what? That
What
makes
are your
sense.
top two people, if you have to say? Like, I know Alex, or I don't know if Alex is your top two, but what are your top two out of curiosity?
I'd say Hormozy, and I think there's the other two would be Mike Rashid. He's like in the powerlifting space, but he's also really business minded. And then Patrick with Dave and Valuetainment. I think with Valuetainment, what I love is like Patrick's at a point now where I think he's really just focused on getting a lot of different perspectives. So like there is a level of like he'll bring on anyone and everyone. Like he brought on President Trump. He's brought on other people, and I think it leads to just a fruitful conversation, right? I think fundamentally, I think sometimes we tend to get away from this concept of like we can disagree, but as long as there's respect, it's still time well spent, right? I don't think we need to always agree or see eye to eye and everything. And that applies to, whether it's like with family, friends, colleagues, but there's just a way to carry yourself when you have disagreements. And I think he really embodies that really well.
Yeah, 100%, dude. And I don't want to spiral this conversation in the wrong direction, but I think it definitely can become an issue when you can't disagree, right? To where you're not able to have conversations and really challenge ideas, because I feel like that's how we've been able to really evolve as a society, right? Even though we didn't agree on similar things. And I think that's kind of thing about even friendship, right? You don't always agree 100%, but you find a way to respectfully talk about your disagreements in a way that you guys can still either like each other, trust each other, hopefully coexist with each other, right? So
Absolutely. I think you got to just lead with the respect. I think if you can't have respect for your fellow human being, it's going to be really hard to have long lasting relationships. And I think part of it too for me, I think is I'm just genuinely curious. I'm a curious person, right? So if someone has a differing point of view, I want to just get to why. I'll ask why like 6 times to understand where they're coming from. Because I think we all have different experiences and exposure growing up. So those ideals are all formed at a young age, and that just carries on with us. So like there's maybe whether it's the types of people they consume content from, growing up, what were they told, what was their belief system, or just three, how they view the world. Everyone views the world differently. I think it can be a hot take. Maybe you have to leave the group chat for a little bit. Other times, it's like, hey, I didn't know you thought like that. That's pretty cool.
sure.
I gotta ask, man, just since it's top of mind, what's your take on everything related to TikTok? I guess I'm curious, how often are you using TikTok? And I think with this state of limbo where whether or not it stays accessible in the U.S., like, do you feel like that's a benefit? It's negative. It's a net neutral to the U.S. Like, where do you stand in that spectrum?
All right, so I am definitely on one end of the spectrum.
Okay.
So check this out. I actually do not use TikTok, right? Yeah, a lot of people are like, you don't use TikTok. I actually do not use TikTok. Back when I was using TikTok, I thought it was something that was easily addictive, man. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
know doom scrolling on IG is a thing, but I was like TikTok. Ah, yeah, and I was like, nah. It was one of those things I knew like I got to get off this thing, man. Like it's gonna do for me at least more damage than good. So, unpopular opinion, I'm not really a fan of TikTok if I'm being honest, right? I feel like there's a lot of we could have a whole conversation on this. You know what I'm saying? But like, I honestly feel like a lot of people touch on this, but how the algorithm is in the U.S. It's not really an algorithm to drive a more productive society. You know what I'm saying? To where it's like, for example, it's like a lot of what you see on there is just like nonsense. You know what I'm saying? I guess and I guess what is nonsense, right? When I say nonsense, I feel like it's not something that adds to your life. It's like entertainment, but the type of entertainment that's just kind of like okay, and we could go down the rabbit hole because there's all kinds of stuff on TikTok and everything like that, right? But I feel like there's things like Instagram, right? To where like it's still addictive, it's still, but I feel like it's not It's constricted, a TikTok tool won't do as much damage as quickly. At the end of the day, of course, tools are how you use them. But I think Instagram is something I think that has more utility to where you can use it in more assets that make sense for productive like work versus TikTok. Let's just TikTok influence it and do your thing. So, but what do you think? What do you think, man? Like, talk to me based on what I said. I'm curious. I'm curious.
No, I actually agree with you. I personally don't use TikTok. I think it's more just like, I think there's already enough social media apps there, and I think I get enough of the same effect with Instagram Reels. Now even LinkedIn has Reels now. I'm like, well, like, what is going on? So I think I don't personally use it. I think occasionally, like, my friends will send me a TikTok to consume, but by no means am I an avid or even active TikTok user, so it doesn't really have an effect on my day to day. I think part of it too, maybe why there's this push to try to keep it is just fundamentally a lot of businesses do use it as a marketing tool, and it has enabled more content creators in the space. So maybe that's the angle that administration is looking at. Is there a way to have this be brought in a more secure way? So we'll see. I think it will be rough for some people, but I think part of just in general with business, it's like you don't want to ever rely on one single channel. So I think that's something to be mindful as we navigate that. Yeah, just switching topics a little bit, man. I think I'm curious. Given your background in sales, I think how do you feel like that's going to prepare you to thrive in this new venture that you're joining with or creating with content? Like, how do you feel like, what are the parallels?
Yeah, man. I feel that with sales, the biggest parallels come from the people experience, right? Because I think podcasting is a people thing. And back when I was selling cars, a lot of it was, or not even just selling cars, back with doing sales, a lot of it's having conversations with people. A lot of times you don't know when you don't know at a certain point, right? If it's on the phone, you have your first initial conversation. And I think there's a lot of elements such as like making a good impression, being personable, and really learning how to have conversations is something that I think I definitely have taken from sales that I definitely see being essential to having with doing podcasts and having people that come on there and want to come back on. At least that's where my mind's at. But what do you think? If you had to say.
Absolutely. I would say it's storytelling. I think fundamentally, if you just look at the art of conversating, it's really all just storytelling, right? Like, you could take the same thing of like, I am doing this, for example, and you ask 10 different people to come up with a different spin. The one that's going to be more engaging is where they can take that same concept and communicate in a way that's appealing to the person they're talking to or the people that they're talking to. The question that I don't always love, but it's a staple in any social gathering is, okay, what do you do for work? Right. So I think how you communicate that with family, friends, or relatives is a lot different than how you communicate that with maybe like other circles. So I think it's the same thing. And I think being able to convey a clear story is what's really important to move the needle, whether that's in your personal life, professional life, social life. So I think it's a really important skill.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. And then I'm curious, like, I know my background in sales. Like, what about your background? Like, how would that tie into? Like, I'm curious what your background is and how that ties in.
Yeah, man, I've had a chance to work in tech for 5 years. I think the last few years I've been customer facing, so like in customer success. So I think really that goes back to that storytelling, right? Like, how do we craft the vision of like, hey, you're starting with our new service here, but here's how we can help you achieve your goals a month, 3 months, 6 months from now, right? And whatever that new feature or new pain point solve for customers, convey that vision of like, hey, we heard you guys, we delivered, this is just the beginning. We're really excited for you guys to start using this and partner with us moving forward. So I would say those are the parallels there.
I got you. So like you get that viewership in and you just keep them like engaged to come back for more and come back for more, right?
Absolutely. If you really think about it, man, I don't know if it's a hot take. I mean, life's all about retention and expansion. I think those are the two principles of customer success, right, with clients. And I think when I mean expansion, I think just that's across the board. You always want to be growing. You always want to be pushing for that next best thing. But I think retention means, I think amongst that lifelong journey of growth, it's like still maintaining your values, like your identity through it all. And I think it's super easy sometimes to, when things are going really well or things are going really bad, that you waver in that. But I think it's that core foundation you have as a person is what helps you navigate through the good and bad.
Retention and expanding. Okay. I guess that's a really way to pack it down, right?
Absolutely, man. And I think we have a couple more minutes, so I just have two rapid fire questions for you, man. I think When it's all said and done, I know you're just starting your journey, but let's just fast forward, let's say, a couple years from now with your podcast. What's your title? What's the impact you want to drive there, man? Like, what do you want people to say about the podcast, the impact that you've driven, let's say, 3 years?
Yes, great question. So what I would want is ideally my impact is I've helped a lot of people that never felt like they could become entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs. I think if I could sum up everything into one goal, that's what it'd be right there. The people that have great ideas, but they're maybe sitting on the couch because they don't believe in themselves. They think it's so hard. It's not really something they learn in school. It just sounds like, oh man, like dude, like being this, like for even the example like being financially, free, or being able to just do something you actually love and live off of that thing. People have never thought that was reality. It's like no, like with technology, especially like living a century, like in the times that we live in, like it's definitely possible. So I think if I could just convey that message and have people start taking action on their dreams that they have deep down inside of them, I think that's exactly like that would be the greatest accomplishment, just doing that right there.
Absolutely, man. I actually got to ask two more questions on that now. I think I'm curious. Patrick McDavid sums up the levels of entrepreneurship really well, but I'm curious from your perspective, do you fundamentally believe everyone and anyone can be a
successful entrepreneur? Interesting question. Here's the reason, right? Define successful, because I feel like that'll really that'll really dictate how I answer the question. So what do you mean by
Sure.
successful?
I'll go into what Patrick McDavid says. Like, for example, there's levels to basketball, right? There's like a YMCA, there's, let's say, middle school, high school, junior college, Division III and AA, D2, D1, overseas, and NBA, right? So let's say the successful entrepreneurship could just be like you're being able to just replace your bills. Say, for example, you make $6,000 a month at your job. I think today's day and age, we're blessed to where there's many ways to get to that same destination. So let's say you're able to provide for yourself and your family. So like say, for example, like Isaiah Thomas at 5'9" was able to make it to the NBA. So he's successful, but due to maybe some of the tangible and intangible traits, so that's like, God-given traits or skill, work ethic, he might max out, but he might not be Michael Jordan, LeBron James, who's arguably like the GOAT in that GOAT conversation, because they just have the balance of like genetics and work ethic and, a couple other factors that went their way. So like, let's say, for example, if the successful entrepreneurship there's a spectrum of like, let's say Elon Musk is on one, right? Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos is on one. First, just being able to live life on your own terms is like the other, where someone can just live off, let's say, whether it's their content, running an Etsy store, Amazon, like just doing other things to make that same amount and just have control of their time.
Yeah. So check this out. I know exactly what you're talking about. I know the exact video with Mike Bugsby, him being like at the level and Shaq, and then and Kobe, and I know exactly what you're saying. So to answer your question, I do believe that everyone can, in theory, be successful in entrepreneurship, but not, of course, not at the same levels. I'd say successful in the aspect of, hey, you're getting financial gain, right? I think everyone can get that. Like, you can make money from being an entrepreneur. Now, I don't think everyone should be an entrepreneur. Even Patrick McDavid talks about entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs, right? So I feel like it also comes down to like knowing, because think about this, right? There's a lot of businesses out there, a lot of ideas. I know that entrepreneurship isn't for everyone, and that's fine, because not everyone should want to be an entrepreneur. People are built different. People have different interests, different things. Maybe someone wants to go within a company and really like kill that company, get promoted all the way to the top. So to answer your question, I feel like in theory, everyone can be an entrepreneur and get some level of success. But I don't think that it's something that everyone should do. And I feel like on top of that too, like depending on, because I don't see success as money. So if that's what you're talking about, everyone can do it. If success is like feeling like satisfied with what you're doing, like I feel like this is what God called me to do. Like I'm doing it, I'm feeling satisfied, like, and I'm feeling like purpose driven every day. I do not believe everyone can do that and be an entrepreneur, man. Because there's gonna be a lot of days you're gonna feel like crap. And if it's really not for you, you're just doing it for the money. You could do it for a little bit of time, but eventually, I think just find what's for you and find how to make money doing what's for you, whatever pocket you go in. Hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. I mean, hey, we love the controversial takes. That's what it's for. So cool, man. No, as we wrap up, just in the interest of time, like where can folks? I guess let's take a step back. When do you plan to launch your show, and where can folks find your show when it is launched?
Yeah, great questions. Have a lineup I really need to execute, make sure everything's edited out nicely before, we launch. I'd say expect in March. I want to shoot for February, but I'll play safe and say March. Expect something by then. And yeah, you can find me at What Is Your Title? That's what it's gonna be on YouTube. I think on Instagram, What Is Your Title Podcast. Email if you guys want to hop on a show. Any people that are just recently getting into entrepreneurship, emails at whatisyourtitle@gmail.com. And yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me at. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on the show. It's definitely been a pleasure having a conversation, and yeah, just being able to chat it up and yeah, just learn more about what you do and talk about what I do as well.
Definitely got to have you on the podcast again. But no, appreciate the time. Have a great rest of your day. And yeah, we'll be in touch, man. And that's off. Sign off, folks.